Good evening all, and welcome. People can be the worst, and that is what we are going to find out today. I hope you're ready, because it's time to get comfortable. Follow me on Twitter, and let the darkness take control. It's still a very early morning, with patches of mist, and not being a weekend, there was very little going on. We are a couple of young policemen in a patrol car, on what was then considered a main road. A joke now, and a joke then. It's a while back, and I'm not sure of the name of the village, but we were very close. The message over the radio was simple. As I remember it, it was something along the lines of, "Man with a gas mask in the main road." We were in the right place at the time, and within seconds I saw a man jogging on the pavement to our left, rapidly pulling the gas mask from his face. Remember, in the UK we drive on the left side of the road. I also got the distinct impression he had an erection. I stopped the car, and without saying a word to my rookie colleague, fully opened his door, and with the narrow pavement, give a very clear signal to the jogger that we wanted him to stop. The jogger obliged, a little short of the car, allowing himself to be well illuminated by the headlights. I got out of the car and approached him, and could not fail to notice a distinct sparkle that did not look like a concentration of sweat or urine on the inside of his uncovered legs. I think, not surprisingly, by this time his erection had subsided. There's nothing in the handbook on how to open a discussion in a situation like this, so I said, "What gives with the mask?" replying without hesitation, "It gives sexual pleasure." I got on the radio to establish more details about the complaint. It didn't appear there was much substance to it, as the young lady was only startled, maybe frightened, as she got out of her car by a man running by her at 2 or 3 in the morning with a gas mask on his face. The next step is to establish his identity, which must have led me to look more closely at his clothing and where he was going to find some form of identity document when his shorts and shirt were made of thin plastic. I distinctly remember the shorts were black, presumably made from a large dirt bin bag, and his shirt was light-colored plastic, but I didn't pursue its origin in my mind. He was also wearing a classic sleeveless cricket jumper pullover, which had a name tape sewn in behind the neck. Those who went to English boarding schools will remember these name tapes. He gave me his name and address, and quite speedily this was confirmed by radio from headquarters, and it was indeed an expensive suburb. Our jogger admitted to being an executive in a large multinational company. I didn't question how this adventure might go down at the next board meeting, nor with his wife if he had one. So what to do if there was no evidence of indecent exposure, no assault of any nature, which left the common law offence of breach of the peace, which I thought was stretching the evidence. I also had no desire to have this man in the back of the police car, or rather to be washing the rear seat after taking him to the police station, only to be given a warning by a sergeant. So I explained that the young lady could have had grounds to make a formal complaint, resulting in a charge of breach of the peace. "Ah," he said, "that sounds like the army conduct prejudicial to good order." I agreed, and then suggested that if he wanted to dress up in this fashion, he should restrict his activities to private property, thinking his garden was quite big enough, not considering what his wife and neighbours might think. I then let him jog on. We then returned to the police station, where the small assembled company wanted to know why I hadn't brought the jogger in. I asked why, and the unanimous response was that they wanted to see the fashion statement. My reason was not considered valid. First off, let me say that I don't hate my mother. I don't love her, but I certainly don't hate her either. My mother is what I can best describe as a lost soul, a person with no purpose, no loyalty, no dedication or consideration for her well-being or the well-being of others. She always puts her habits and addictions before anything or anyone else, and sadly I don't think that will ever change. During my childhood I didn't go to school very often. In fact, I hardly ever went in. It got so bad I really fell far behind my classmates, only catching up with my peers when I went to college, something my mum just patronized me about and called me a waste of time for. She never was the most supportive or kindest of people. But anyway, onto the story. When I was around 9, my mum's habits started to get really bad. It all started when she met this man, Chris. He was stocky, just above average height, and grey hair and a grey beard, despite being only in his early 40s. Let me give you a mental image of Chris. This guy was hard-spoken, and always stared at me and my siblings intently, but it wasn't a kind of concerned, watching of a parent guardian being vigilant. It was an icy cold, piercing kind of look that petrified us and sent shivers down our spines. It seemed like he hated us, which I remember thinking was strange at the time because all I ever did was be polite and obedient in fear of what he may do. My mum started having Chris over more and more, always forcing us upstairs and out of the way. If we dared venturing downstairs for even basic essentials like food or water, we'd be thrown, and that's no exaggeration. She would take us by the arms and fling us full force back into our rooms and lock the door, which she had put a lock on from the outside for some reason. It is only now looking back at this period of my life that I realized just how messed up that actually was. She and Chris would party for days at a time, and I really do mean days. They would simply force us in our room and lock us in, as if it was some kind of prison. And in truth, that is what it felt like to us, a prison. We had no food, no water, we had nothing. By the time Chris had finally left, or had just passed out completely, my mother would finally release us and we would finally get to eat. Not that there was ever much to eat, but we always said at least water and potatoes is better than starving. Anything is better than dying. And yes, you did hear me correctly, potatoes. There was no bread, no milk, no cheese to have on them, not even the sliced variety. We just had these gruesome-looking potatoes. Sometimes we even had to scrape off various molds and funguses growing on them. It was vile, but we had to survive. We all knew well more than hoped that one day things would be better. This would go on and on for weeks and weeks. It got so bad we actually started to hoard any food we can get our hungry hands on and stash it in our rooms. You see, our mum would occasionally go shopping. Not often, and she wouldn't get very much when she did. Well, not for us anyway. Her groceries usually consisted of beer, vodka, many packets of cigarettes, along with the usual rolling papers, tobacco and tinfoil. Make of that what you will. But the point being, she would blow her benefit money intended for us on herself. And of course, on Chris. So on the rare occasion she purchased any edible items, it'd be cheap smart price lemonade, a packet of crisps or chocolate bars and biscuits. We would be elated and cherish each bite. We wouldn't eat it all though, although we did at first. We soon learnt to be smarter, and as silly as it sounds, ration it between us for the 2 to 3 days we would be locked in the room. And no, we didn't have a bathroom in there. Let's just say there were a lot of warm bottles laid around the room, and the bathroom was one busy place when we finally got out. But in truth, the less said about that, the better. She and Chris would often order out, but of course would never give us anything that they ate. We were literally starving. Luckily for us, there was one place, Ashes, who knew of our situation. Well, I'm guessing they did, and I guess they felt sorry for us, because one day they made us an offer we couldn't believe nor refuse. It all started when me and my 2 brothers snuck out while my mother was passed out and Chris wasn't around, and as embarrassing as it was, we all mutually decided that we didn't have any other choice but to ask. So I reluctantly asked the man working there if me and my brothers could please have a little food, and when we could, we promised we'd pay him back. He looked at us in disbelief and just said he's really sorry and that he wished he could, but as he only worked there. We looked back and meekly just said okay and that we understood. Looking back, we must have seemed so pathetic, so discouraged but not at all surprised. We started to leave. As we were just about to leave, the manager called us back in after, I presume, hearing our conversation. He stated that every night, if there was anything left, and if we were prepared to come back just before midnight when they closed, we could have whatever was left instead of it going in the trash into waste. I know this probably sounds pathetic to some of you, but to us, we couldn't believe our luck. We were just thankful and grateful to this man. As over the top as it might sound, I genuinely believe this man saved our lives. On the nights we could sneak out and go there, the manager was true to his word. Chips, sausages, samosas, whatever he had left he gladly gave us. Even on the rare nights there was nothing left, he would still give us each a bottle to share out of his own pocket, and apologizing in the process. But in truth, he never had anything to apologize for. I don't think he even knew how much he was truly helping us. He never asked, never questioned, nor patronized us. He was kind and a good man, and I'd just like to stop the story to say, wherever you are, thank you. I really am truly sorry I never got your name. Over time, my mum and Chris gradually got worse and worse, consuming more and more substances, with one another in turn spending more and more. Money we really didn't have. They were both unemployed, and any money supposed to look after us, they certainly didn't use in that regard. It was at this time they both started to get even more aggressive and short-tempered, and this was when things got really scary. Chris became more physical with us and would force us and lock us in the room on my mother's command, or when he felt as though we had angered or disrespected him, when all we really did was play or speak too loudly in his eyes. This continued on and on for some time until eventually things escalated dramatically. My mum and Chris started to fight more, but not just fight. They would scream, throw things, and it honestly sounded like a war zone down there. But thanks to the awful place we lived in, and the horrible individuals who inhabited it, the police were never called. If I'm honest with myself, even if they were, I don't believe they would have or could have done anything. My mom was as bad as she could be, but I doubt she would have cooperated with the authorities, even though Chris had physically harmed her several times. However, she did eventually stop seeing him so much. It was gradual, but eventually Chris had stopped showing up altogether. Me and my brothers were delighted. We truly believed this could be a turning point, a fresh start. But how foolish were we? My mom went off the rails. She began spending all day and night partying in many different places with different men all night, and then she'd end up sleeping all day. She blew through money even faster now and eventually got into debt. As you can imagine, we began to be locked back in the room more and more. It got to the point we eventually snapped and had enough. We all kicked and eventually kicked the door open and kicked the lock clean off. There was a moment of tense silence as we hoped that she and her, shall we say, guest for the evening didn't hear us, and to our absolute relief, they didn't. Or at least they didn't care enough to check. We decided that we would just stay in our rooms, but at least now we could use the bathroom and drink from the tap. It still really sucked, but for us it was just nice not to be confined to the room anymore. Fast forward a few weeks and Chris is back. He's round again, and we all knew it was only because he was lending her money to pay off her debts and enable her to use again. But as kids, we could do nothing, only sigh and feel trapped. The partying, the long stints in our room, it was all to our dismay. But unfortunately, or fortunately depending on how you look at it, this time it was only short-lived. With the constant partying came the constant arguments. It got really bad again to the point my mum told Chris to leave, and after some kicking, scratching and screaming along with several broken items, including the old box television and the microwave, he eventually did. But not before vowing to return to collect his money, and that she better have it or her kids, us, would regret it. An empty threat. Right? Wrong. A few days went by without incident, but then one morning, a Saturday as I recall, my mother received a call. It was Chris. He demanded his money back and that he was coming over. She screamed at him that she didn't have it, but he told her in a sharp, loud tone she better get it or else. Thankfully, my mum puts her phone on speaker, so we're all terrified, but at least we knew what was happening. I just remember my mum pausing for a minute and then softly said, "Okay, Chris, fine. Come over. Callum will give it to you." And upon hearing this, my blood ran cold. I didn't have his money. I didn't have any money. Not a penny. What could I do? She then abruptly hung up. She crouched down slightly to be eye level with me and in a matter of fact simply told me that Chris is coming over, and as he had a key he'd let himself in. Just please tell him I didn't have his money, but I was ironing earlier, and as it was hot, decided to iron in the garden, and I had the money on the ironing board to keep it safe. But a big gust of wind came and blew it away. I tried to chase it, but I couldn't find any of it, and so that we're sorry. So please just tell him that, is what she asked me. And then she left. She left us all alone with an angry addict coming over. An angry addict who wanted his money, and wanted it right now. And all that she had left to defend us with was this tall tale. This lie so absurd and poorly constructed, me and my brothers couldn't even believe it. Several minutes went by and me and my brothers just huddled in the front room not knowing what to do. We were so terrified, it honestly felt like time stood still. It felt as if we were just standing there waiting for something to happen for hours, but truthfully it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. Suddenly the front door flung open forcefully and we all instantly knew it was Chris. He barged into the room and demanded to know where our mother was hiding and where his money was. This guy was terrifying, big, angry, and he honestly looked wild. He was sweating profusely, his eyes wide, and he looked furious. He truly looked insane, like he wanted to hurt us. My brothers and I just stood there, frozen in fear. I looked at them, and in my role as their big brother, even though I was just as scared and just as powerless, I knew I had to speak up. I had to do something or at least try, so I told him that she wasn't here, and we don't know where she is. He just scoffed and said, "Typical, hiding things as usual. That's what your mother is, a coward and a thief." We didn't answer, and he didn't like that. He walked closer to us and got into my face and said, "Forget your mum, where's my money?" His breath was rotten and up close I could see how red and bloodshot his eyes were. He looked possessed. His eyes were a mixture of dilated pupil and bloody eyes. They looked demonic. His eyes only shook me further, and as a result, I struggled to answer. I don't know," I finally managed to blurt out. "None of us do." He snarled, called me a liar, and demanded that I tell him, and that my mum better have his money, so I better talk now, or else. I really don't. I begged him. I just wanted him to leave. I just wanted me and my brothers to be safe, but of course he didn't believe me. He inched closer to me and spat in my face. I was at the brink of tears at this point, and my brothers just looked in horror, frozen in place, tears forming in their eyes. "I really don't know. My mum said she lost it while ironing in the wind," I replied. Stupid, I know, but I was scared and desperate, and at the same time, it's all my mouth could form. He really didn't like that. He grabbed me by the shirt and lifted me off the ground. "Do you think that's funny? Am I joking to you?" He screeched into my face. I couldn't. I couldn't even bring myself to answer nor look at him. I was just so scared. I just wanted this to be a bad dream and for it all to be over. I wanted him to go away and leave us alone. "Look at me. Am I joking?" he screamed. "No, I'm sorry. I don't know where the money is. I don't know where my mum is. I don't know anything. Please just let me go." "No, but mark my words. If I don't get my money, I'll be back, and I'll end you, I'll end your brothers, I'll end your mum. I'll end you. All of me and my kids will dance on your grave." And with that he left. No violence, no termination, just 3 terrified kids. I know to other stories this might seem relatively tame, but it shook me to my very core. It traumatized me for quite some time, to be honest. My mum would return home some days later without explanation or even the smallest hint of interest or concern as to what transpired while she was away. All that despite the fact she had, in my eyes, and my brother's, left us for dead. That may be dramatic, but she left these young children to defend off a clearly very unstable addict, and for that I cannot forgive her. Me and my brothers went to live with my aunt after this, and thankfully we began to see her less and less. She actually ended up getting back with Chris. I know, typical, right? You can believe that. So that whole terrifying ordeal ended up being for absolutely nothing. Thanks, Mum. So although I don't hate you, please, Mum and Chris, let's never, ever meet again. This happened a good 20 plus years ago, and I had forgotten about it until today. I think it's a good reminder that sometimes the most unexpected things can happen when you least expect it. This event really made me feel like I couldn't be safe anywhere, and caused me to be hypervigilant every time I left my house, and that feeling stayed with me for a long time afterwards. It was wintertime, about 11 in the morning, and I was standing at a bus stop. This bus was in a mini mall, where there was a bigger department store, a dollar store, and another little shop. I was going to catch the bus to my brand new job, and that day was going to be my very first day at the new shop, so I was excited and nervous and definitely wanted to make a good impression. While I waited for the bus, I realized I was a good 15 minutes early, and also had forgotten my gloves, and it was bitterly cold. My hands were freezing, but I only had a few dollars on me, so I figured it would be cheapest to buy new gloves at the dollar store. When I went in, it was quite big, but there were no other people in there yet, besides the older Asian man behind the front counter. He gave me a big smile and came around the corner to stand next to me. I asked him where the gloves were located, and he said, "I'll show you." As soon as he said this, he laughingly grabs my left hand with his right one and starts bringing it towards the back of the store. The back of the store had a display table with some things on it, toys I think, and on the wall behind it was a section with winter items, and just to the right of that, a door that said employees only. Everything happened really fast. When he grabbed my hand and started bringing me towards the back, I kind of awkwardly laughed because he was laughing, and I just thought he was an overly friendly guy who was trying to be helpful. I had also been in this store a few times before, and both times the same guy was there, but he was ringing people up and he was always happy and smiley and laughy with every customer who he interacted with. I never got any weird vibes from him or any other time I was there. So just as we got to the back, out of nowhere, the hand holding mine clamps around my wrist really hard. His other hand reaches over and grabs my chest ridiculously hard, twists it, and starts pushing me towards the employee-only door. I could not believe how fast everything changed. I'm so happy I had worn my thick boots that day, because the only thing I could do was kick him in the shin and try to pull away from him. We went back and forth, with me trying to get away from him, while he tried to get a hold of my arm tighter, and while also trying to push me towards the door, while I'm still trying to land kicks. All in this, he lost his balance and fell into the display table, and then I was able to get my arm away, and I just took off running as fast as I could. I ran to the back of the next store, and they had a customer service department where there were other people and there were phones. So to try and wrap this up, I used the store's phone to call my mum because I didn't know why. I was so confused and wondered if I should call the cops. I was trying to figure out what just happened while also realizing that I missed the bus and was going to mess up the first day at my new job. Well, I did call the cops, though after I got off the phone with my mum who came to get me. The way I looked at it was like, okay, I was already alright, but what if I hadn't gotten lucky? What if this guy does something to someone else and they don't get away? What if something even worse could happen to someone else or already did? This happened in broad daylight on a weekday morning, so it could happen to anyone. They arrested him and we had to go down to the station to give a statement. About a week later, there's an article in the newspaper that they've arrested 5 people that own the dollar store because they had apparently been setting up these dollar stores for a few weeks as a front for some shady activity, and then they would close it down, wait a month or two, and go to a different county to open another one. Like I said in the beginning of this messed with me for quite a while after that. I don't feel safe when I leave my house. I just wanted to buy a pair of gloves. So creep from the dollar store, let's never meet again. 2012 had a rocky start for me, to say the least. And had I have known at the time that I was going to be using my Junker Project car to save my life from someone I had hardly known, but who had also been in my life for almost 13 years, I might have spent less time worrying about reading and about working on 3D art, and more time out working on the car or my own fitness. I, however, felt that having finished high school single and spent the following 5 years on failed dates, maybe once a year, that there was absolutely no reason to think anyone would want me around or to bother me, as I was a monster just under 280 pounds. Rob and I had become acquainted through school as far back as elementary school, but I had never really got to know him, often helping him out with bullies and such simply because I couldn't stand watching. I wasn't very popular. Pretty much everyone, including the outcasts, left me alone. Even Rob did till late middle school, and it wasn't hard to see why. I always looked like I was ready to end someone, and when I wasn't, it usually meant I had fallen asleep in class. After graduation, as far as I was concerned, everyone moved on with their lives and grew up. You know, got jobs or died young partying, as words came up from time to time through social media. Rob's parents had apparently moved to Australia for 3 years and left Rob with the house. His uncle moved in to help with the upkeep on bills and such. Rob himself had developed schizophrenia at some point shortly after graduation, and this was brought to light by the passing of his grandfather. I wish someone had been around to tell me of any of the above before he tried to drag me to hell with him. I would run into him from time to time at the mall or Walmart or GameStop, just regular places that didn't seem odd at all for me to be talking to him. It was somewhat of a break from my fairly boring life. This was the way of a small town. Rob had become a big guy, well balanced in weight and height compared to the majority of our school years. His self-esteem was still shot, and he would always ask if I wanted to go drinking, but as conversations went on, would also ask if he could help me out with anything. He always asked these two things if we talked, no matter how short the conversation was. I always declined. At first I thought he had outwardly started acting bi or gay, or had taken a liking to me, so I avoided him wherever I could. I was bad at getting a date, and I'm straight, so turning down a guy wasn't exactly in my mindset anyway. Spring of 2012, I went to a car meet to show off my new prize. Rob was there, but something was wrong. This was 2 states away from home, and he didn't own a vehicle yet. Looking back, it just seems odd. I knew this was off, and got that gut feeling that told me trouble was brewing. He didn't approach me, though he did watch, giving glances on occasion from where he stood. Before the meet ended, I decided I'd say hello, at least to be polite, and see what he was up to. In a voice that was almost as if his mind had been somewhere else altogether, he said, "That was messed up, you know, and it's not going to be the last mistake either, I bet." My head fell to my right shoulder, and my eye face was again locked in confusion. "What?" I said hello. "Hello," he mimicked in the same voice again. I turned away and brushed it off as him being childish. Maybe someone had already pissed him off and he was just venting. Ah well, not my problem. The meet ends, and I'm easily the 3rd or 4th to get out. Rob had been sitting in the passenger of some Dodge Charger, and looked to be now watching the owner, waiting tiredly to be taken home. Skip ahead a few weeks for another meet. I show up late after getting off work late, and I'm going to see a restored Ford Falcon that this guy on the forums I've joined have been posting pictures of. There's a small standing around the car. That's not the owner, it's Rob. And he's looking dead on me as I walk up. He waits till I'm walking by him around the front of the car and lightly open-handedly pushes my shoulder to get me to look at him. And the second I do that, using the mock voice from last time, comes up again with the words, "Mistakes, mistakes." I'm losing my nerves because the voice doesn't sound to be a threat. But when I ask him what his deal is, it's like I suddenly stop existing again. There's a guy next to me now, Travis. I know him because of his truck. You can't miss the paint job. He's out of his head. Just ignore him. It's not the first strange thing he said tonight. Travis seems to have caught the look on my face, and I guess is trying to help. The evening ends. Everyone leaves but me. I stick around to enjoy the night sky and cool breeze. I'm in an empty lot on a mountainside for at least another 40 minutes before I finally go. There's the Falcon about 20 or so miles back down the road, between town. It's sitting on the shoulder, blinkers on, and Rob and the owner both leaned on the car looking entirely bummed out. It ran out of gas, and they've both just finished arguing about whose fault that is. I offer to give them a lift to go get gas. The owner instead hands me a canister from the truck and some money, insisting that they'll both need to watch the car. No chances I'm letting anything happen to it. As I leave, I hear them get on each other's case, and could almost swear for the first time I've actually heard legit anger in the otherwise depressed, normal voice of Rob. I return to them. The owner is sitting in the driver's seat in a huff. Rob quickly nabs the canister from me and waves me off, almost in a disgusted fashion. Maybe I should have taken the hint that Rob's mocking and such were a mental issue, but for whatever reason I kept thinking it's just some misplaced anger. "Guys, you sure you won't need any more help?" The owner starts to speak up, but it's cut off when Rob whirls on his heels from filling the tank, and in a rage-filled scream goes, "Always be helpful, but never when needed, always a mistake, we don't need you." I'm not about to fight with him or let him get any closer to me. Fighting Rob would be about the dumbest thing I could do. I was out of shape, and he on the other hand was big, but not muscular, but tough enough to take me out without a second thought. I wouldn't go to another car meet for a month. However, it'd be far from the last time I saw Rob. These next 2 visits would leave me helping him to get home, and others running away from him with a dislocated shoulder. I had been out in town getting some supplies to build a new desk for my home office. On the way home, I'd come across a gold Corolla, sitting half on the road, half off, front end blown apart by an impact with a deer, and never too far from predictable with my luck. It's Rob. He was down and clearly had been crying, sitting in the front of his now totaled car, holding his keys, mumbling about how badly his luck was. I didn't recognize him at first, and when he saw it was me who had pulled up beside the car, his face turned from sad to broken joy, clearly still broken but relieved. As he walked up to my window, the tow truck he called showed up. He sternly asked for a lift home after he directed me there, and I dropped him off. The ride was silent other than directions, and he got out with a painful sigh and said thanks, and went into a house where no lights were even turned on, and I left. I had rented a small car garage to work in to be away from home so my family couldn't distract me from my work, so I could study my car as I was using it for reference to get a 3D model I was making. It had been 2 months since I'd last seen Rob or gone to a car meet, and summer was having a lift of heat waves, so instead of sitting at the computer, I was under a car doing minor repairs like a brake job. The only people who should have any idea of where I was or what I was doing should be my parents and the shop owner Tom. However, when a hand gripped around my forearm and yanked me out from under the car where I had been trying to see to undoing a caliper bolt, the last person I ever expected to see was Rob. "It's always your fault," he said loudly and angrily to my face as I tried to jerk free and get to my feet. In a moment, getting to my feet would be the least of my worries. Rob had holstered me up to my feet and raised a clenched fist. "They always tell me it's your fault. He swung his right fist, his left hand firmly grasped my forehead. Seeing his fist already as he swung, I jumped, and it did little to help the full blow, as it went straight to my kneecap, and the force from me jumping caused him to stumble, sending both of us to the ground. I attempted to kick up to my feet once more, but my right arm was now bent in his grip from where he had fallen. Bad idea. I got up already, but my force against his grip not only forced me back down, but had dislocated my shoulder. Pain. Pain was now screaming its way through my entire right arm, and I yelled out, which caused him to let go. He kicked me in the back as he got to his feet, and reached for the nearby jack, swinging it to the ground at me as I rolled clean under the car to the other side, getting to my feet. "You're not. I can't. No, you'll make more mistakes, more trouble. Stop. Stop," he yelled and rushed around to the other side of the car, blocking my attempt to run out to the open bay door. Rob had the wrench I was using in his hands now, and was just standing there, enraged, glaring me down. I wasn't some pro fighter, but I wasn't going to waste time being chased around the car either. No more thinking. I ran at him and jumped, tossing all of me into him. Being overweight paid off, with its one and only benefit. My weight knocked him down and sent me tumbling over towards the bay door. I got up, busted out the door in a sprint as the wrench flew by me, crashing against the asphalt, and I heard Rob yelling and running after me, but he tripped, and I glanced only for a moment, and made my way to the project/junker car. I got in, turned the key, and it turned over. Rob had gotten up and was coming at me, bending to grab the wrench again as he did. I turned the wheel hard and floored it, and I hit him at waist level and slammed on the brakes, watching him bash against the hood and fall back onto the pavement, this time staying down, groveling in pain. Kicking the door open to make room, I frantically started to reach for my phone in my right pocket with my left arm to call the cops, and to the best of my ability, started running towards the owner's home. The yelling had caught Tom's attention, and he had seen everything that happened outside the garage. He was already on the phone with the police, and after reaching me, stayed between Rob and me. After a hospital visit and a very fun session of "let the interns do it," the police stopped by and informed me that with Tom's statement and my injuries, it was clear what had happened. They also went on to tell me that Rob had recently been suspected of trying to attack another person, and had in fact beaten the Ford Falcon's owner the night I saw them. I have not seen Rob since then, and to the best of my knowledge, he is currently being held in a mental institution somewhere in Pennsylvania, close to the family he left here in the US. I don't think there's some lesson I can give or an explanation outside his mental health condition. All I would like to say, at the end of this, fight no matter what. Even if it seems hopeless, just fight. To set the scene, my friends, a married couple, had just bought a house in Central Oregon. The house is a little ways outside of town, set back in the woods and bordering on a national forest. It sits on almost 3 acres of fairly wooded land, and there is a small second dwelling in the back that is essentially a one-bedroom house. They were letting me rent it from them, as we had all lived together for the last year in a rental house downtown. It's early July, and I had already moved in a few weeks ahead of them because the husband was finishing an accelerated summer class. I was working from home and was the only one on the property. This was a bit before I adopted my dog, so I was really alone. All our neighbors are a ways off, since all the plots there are several acres minimum, so the little house is fairly isolated. It's about 9:30 a.m., and my work is in full swing. I would start early in the morning, and the phones were generally extremely busy at this time. Suddenly I hear a knock on my door. This freaks me out because I was supposed to be alone on the property, but I quickly push the anxiety out of my mind and figure one of my friends probably came to work on the house and needed something from me. With the way my front door is positioned in relation to the windows, I have no way of seeing who is at the door without opening it. I open the doors to see this little old lady standing there. She introduces herself as the previous owner of the house and asks if I'm the homeowner. I tell her no, that I'm renting the small unit from the homeowners, but that they should be moving in a few weeks from now. She then asks if she could take some flowers from the garden, claiming she planted them for her dead mother. I tell her to go for it because I didn't really care and needed to get back to work, so I closed the door and resumed working. Later that day, when I clocked out for lunch, I called my friends to tell them what happened. They seemed oddly unsettled by the whole thing, and explained to me that the house had been owned by one couple since it was built, and their daughter, who was not the woman at the door, was selling it because they had both passed away. This left me feeling a bit odd, but I shrugged it off and tried not to overthink it. A week later, my friends are doing work in the main house, but had parked in the garage, so it didn't look like anyone was there. I was working again, as usual, when I heard what sounded like someone walking through the brush outside. I texted my friend to ask what he was doing outside the house, but he said he wasn't at the house, and that they were both still in the main house. So I got up and looked through my blinds into the backyard, and there's a woman rummaging through the brush. I couldn't tell what she was doing exactly, as the brush is fairly high back there, but I went out later and it seemed like she had been digging. Of course, this freaked me out a bit. My car was the only one visible, so it would seem like I was alone. I immediately called my friends in the main house, who came out with their dogs to figure out what was going on. The dogs began barking as soon as they walked into the yard, because he barks at everything, but he still was out front in my house, and she was behind it. As soon as she heard the dogs, I heard her start moving hurriedly away from the house. At this point, she had to move to one of the blind spots on the side of my house, by the garage, so I could no longer watch her through the window. I heard my friend call after her, but she took off running into the woods. There have been no parked cars on the property, so she hadn't driven up. We never managed to catch up with her, as she had a pretty good head start, so I still don't know what she was doing around my house. I adopted a dog a few days later. I'd been in the process since before the initial encounter, and the dog was easily frightened by anything unexpected, so she barks and growls at any time, even when pine cones fall on the roof. Sometimes she'll even bark at nothing. Anyway, to the flower lady. Don't be creepy. Let's not meet again. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for following me on Twitter. If you do, that's amazing, and if you don't, please do it. It would mean a lot to me, and it would mean a lot to you, I'm sure, because, you want to do it, probably, maybe. I'm just joking around. Hope everyone's good. My voice is feeling a bit funky. That second story, bro. Man, that was dark. So sorry. Really sorry for those boys. It must be the worst to be raised by terrible people. I'm sure some of you listening now might even have experienced something similar, and my heart goes out to all of you. Damn. Well, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to everyone who listened to tonight's video, and of course my amazing and fantastic members and patrons. You know who you are, and now everyone else does because your names are on screen. If you would like to join, feel free to check out the links. You get some perks for doing so. So yeah, think about it. But for now, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.